Hey everybody, quick video today. Per viewer request, I'm going to be sharing my current Glenn Miller collection. This is the largest collection that I have going of any particular artist. And yes, even Patsy Cline is nowhere near where we're at with Glenn Miller. I've been working on this pretty much since day one, getting to the point where I'm fairly selective now. I don't just pick up anything. I've tried to get duplicates into the hands of friends and family and things like that. But we're going to start with the 12-inch albums, and then we'll go on to some of the other records, 78s, box sets, 45s. Not going to cover tapes or CDs or anything digital today, just records. Let's start with this bin that I've got them in, a Beatles Yellow Submarine bin. You may be saying, what is the tie-in there? Well, there is one. There is one, actually. Glenn Miller's Army Air Corps Band actually recorded at Abbey Road Studios, EMI, back in 1944. So there is a little bit of a tie-in there. Let's go ahead and start with the 12-inch albums, and we'll just kind of fly through this. Won't spend a whole lot of time, but I want to highlight some of the cool items in the collection. Okay, so these are in no particular order, by the way. This is one of the complete Glenn Miller 2-record sets by Bluebird. I love the fact that these, you can't see right here, but they are on these beautifully recreated Bluebird labels. These are true mono, which is what the discerning Glenn Miller collector wants. And we'll just set it aside for now. I've got several of these, and I don't have the complete set yet. That's, I guess, one thing I'm still working on there. This is one of my favorite covers. Sometimes I will buy stuff just for the cover, not necessarily because I need a specific copy. The music in this is actually really good. It's Reader's Digest, which are obviously RCA pressings. There are some, I wouldn't necessarily call them bootleg, but third-party label stuff. This is a 2-record set, and if I remember correctly, I think that's some soundtrack material. Going through the collection here, the authentic sounds of Glenn Miller. This one is pretty frequent. This is actually a Salada Foods promotion, I believe. And now we've got some Chesterfield recordings, the radio show that he was famous for doing. This is a Sunbeam label of the early 80s. This is, what is this? Okay, so this is a 2-disc set of Army Air Corps music. If you haven't heard Glenn Miller's Army Air Corps stuff, I would highly encourage you to do so. Full orchestral accompaniment, not just the dance band piece. It was such a huge musical organization that there were actually sub-bands, like sub-units off of it. There was a classical orchestra standalone, there was a jazz band, there was the dance band, there was the full combined orchestra. Here's another 2-disc set in the complete series. Here is Sunrise Serenade, Glenn Miller and his orchestra. I believe this is a 2-disc set, and I think I only have one of those 2 records in that. These represent some, they aren't bootlegs, they're actually, oh wait, no, this is a Jasmine label. So this is some of the Army Air Corps music. I was going to say, I have a few custom RCA records that were pressed from, I think it was the Dayton, Ohio Air Force Museum. Had some custom Glenn Miller Army stuff printed. Remember when Glenn Miller's greatest hits, very 1969 to 1970-ish there. That one feels like a double record set. This is a standalone disc here. What is this? The Sound of Glenn Miller, and I've got this, the inner sleeve, but not the actual jacket itself. Okay, let's jump back in here. Said it's a quick video, maybe not so quick. Marvelous Miller Moods. I also have some 7-inch EPs, and one of them is this, which is a really cool thing to have. This is Glenn. So this is a 70s set, one of the records from the 70s set. It was actually a box set, and the box was deteriorating, so I took the records out. And I apologize, this is kind of awkward. I'm doing this with trying to talk into the microphone back here, but reach my arms over here. The original recordings, the Manistee Stereo electronically enhanced RCA Camden, which is the Value RCA label, and the electronically reprocessed stereo is a topic for another day. We've done some content about that. Typically, you try to avoid that. You want to go to the original mono. Here's another 2-album set of the complete Glenn Miller. Those are based off of a series of tapes made off the metal parts in the 1970s by a guy named Frank Driggs. And if you are a Glenn Miller fan and you have the 1991 complete Bluebird set, it's actually the same recordings that were used for this set in the 70s. Something Old, New, Borrowed, and Blue, which was what Glenn Miller called his famous medleys. And this, you'll see, is not Glenn Miller in the middle. That's Ray McKinley. So this is from the 1950s era Glenn Miller Orchestra, living stereo. So it's a super high quality recording. And that orchestra is still performing to this day and has been ever since after the movie came out in 54. The dance band started up, I think, in 56, again, touring. So, you know, it has been pretty much going nonstop. Not pretty much. It has been going nonstop since 1956. And obviously previous to that until the end of World War II. This is one of those records. This is so some of the Army stuff. And if we look on the back here, oh shoot, where is it? Somewhere on here it'll say that it's a custom pressed record. Really cool stuff. I love it. Glenn Miller on the Air, Volume 3. This is a very desirable set for some broadcast material. This is Glenn Miller. This is a common one you'll see floating around out there. There's some good material on there. I think it's got a very long cut of... I'm not sure if it's got the movie version of Kalamazoo on there, but there's a desirable track on there. The Unforgettable Glenn Miller 70s RCA. That's a gatefold issue. This is 20th Century Fox, so movie soundtrack stuff. I apparently don't have the jacket for that. If you're a Glenn Miller fan, the Fox recordings for the two movies, Orchestra Wives and Sun Valley Serenade, they did, are the highest quality fidelity that the civilian band ever was heard in. I mean, it's the best of the best. Got some random stuff in here. I'm going to really try to fly through this. If you had to pick one Glenn Miller album to take with you to a deserted island, it should be this, A Legendary Performer. I could do a whole show just on this album and why it's so special. Look into it. You know, just stream it online if you need to. It's a fantastic, fantastic album. Here is some more later Glenn Miller. This is 70s era Glenn Miller Orchestra under the direction of Buddy DeFranco. Glenn Miller, this is by the members of kind of record, so that should technically not be in there. I've got some members of, you know, alumni records that I put in my big band section that don't go straight in here. This is another core issue. This is the first non-reprocessed stereo that was largely made available. 1969, they finally realized we should probably issue the original mono recordings. You'll see it says Victor Mono up there. They're very desirable. And it took me a long time to figure out why 1944 to 69. What is that? What significance is that? It's a terrible... I don't know why you would put... First of all, I don't like the fact it's called a memorial because that's overly depressing. This is a beautiful gatefold record celebrating his whole recording career. Nothing after 1942, I believe, is even on here. So very strange choice. And I guess there's some rare versions that say 1944 to 1970. This is a treasured record. Surprised I'm holding it with one hand if that's the case. This is a V-disc. So a government issue, no royalties paid out. Glenn Miller V-disc record from the war. There's this. There's just a lot of stuff in here. And I said this is going to be a quick video. It's not so much. Another late 70s, I believe, maybe early 80s, directed by Jimmy Henderson. This is a direct-to-disc recording. It's absolutely luscious. One of the best out there. This looks like a bootleg. Mole Jazz. Glenn Miller is plagued with bootlegs. There is so many bootlegs. This is a 20th Century Fox, so that's going to be based on the movie stuff. Glenn Miller Originals. I think, did we already show that one? Maybe I do have a duplicate. This is Legendary Performer Volume 2. A lot less desirable than Volume 1. If it didn't have the same cover, it would almost bear no resemblance to the original. Best of Glenn Miller. Also have this on cassette. I think that's Volume 3. This is one of the Air Force records, special products. The Patterson Air Force, Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, Ohio. So yeah, there was like 4 or 5 different records that they produced. And they do turn up. Here's another from the Complete. This is a library issue. You can see a little Dewey Decimal card down there. The Great Glenn Miller and His Orchestra. It's a Camden reissue. Another from the Complete set. This is another Ray McKinley. This is a pretty popular one. Absolutely great album. Let me scoot the camera up a little bit. Because an interesting one. Returns to the Glen Island Casino, which was a pivotal era for the Glenn Miller Orchestra. This is 70s era under the direction of Buddy DeFranco. There's a copy of that. Okay, I guess I do have some duplicates. Alrighty. The sound of Glenn Miller. Do we already see this one too? I need to really go through here and purge this for duplicates. The one and only Glenn Miller Camden. This is interesting. A stereo effect reprocessed from monophonic again. The original recordings of Glenn Miller and his orchestra. This is a Pickwick Camden. Interesting to see those two together. This is cool. This is a Mayfair stereo record. I'll pull that out so I don't lose my spot. What's really cool about this is one of the few times you're going to get some Glenn Miller music on a colored vinyl. Check that out. Really colored vinyl record. Sorry for the purist out there that just had a conniption for me referring to that as a vinyl. I'm sorry. I should know better. And what do we got next? Some Jerry Gray. So Jerry Gray, this is again really an offshoot. Jerry Gray was the ace arranger for the Glenn Miller Orchestra. He came originally from the Artie Shaw Orchestra and then went on to have a successful band of his own. Sort of competed with the current and authorized Glenn Miller Orchestra of the 1950s. But that was a 50s issue there. Ray Eberle, same thing. Ray Eberle was a vocalist. Ray Eberle plays Glenn Miller favorites. Another Tops/Mayfair issue. Here's another. So I got a couple alumni records in here. This is a cool one. Glenn Miller's Singers. So these are the vocalists and that were closely associated with the Glenn Miller Orchestra throughout the development of the band, having their own records. Symphony for Glenn. I see this all the time in thrift shops. Finally picked one up. It's just like a 101 strings kind of deal. Tex Beneke's Orchestra, Moonlight Serenade on Camden. Tex Beneke led the band after Glenn went missing from 1945 till about 1950 when he parted ways with the band. Pure Gold, this is a pretty common compilation. I like it. The Carnegie Hall Concert. This is a great, great, great live concert. I have a 10-inch version of this as well. Some Army recordings. This is actually just a cover, a jacket that's, rat chewed, and I probably should do away with that. That was the first version of that I found until I got another one. I kept finding them. This is an interesting one, some soundtrack stuff. So this is some of the Fox recordings again. The best fidelity you're gonna find. Camden. I've got another copy of this. Here's the actual copy of this that I have with the record in it. Another best of. This is volume 3. I think the purple one we looked at was volume 2, actually. Another copy of this. And I thought I had purged the duplicates, but I hadn't. No, here's volume 2. So the purple one might have been volume 1. Maybe that's from another set. This is one of the first Glenn Miller LPs I got. It's got one of my favorite Glenn Miller songs, Happy in Love, on it. If you haven't heard that, check it out. These are more. There's like 3 or 4 records here from that box set I told you where the box got destroyed. All right, Stardust here. It's another Tex Beneke record. I think we had this. Yeah, we definitely had this already. So I have a duplicate problem. In the digital mood is a great record. It's ironic that it's in the digital mood, but it's an analog record. Legendary Glenn Miller Volume 10. It's part of a different complete set. Here's another Salada Foods one. Here's another, what is this one? International Camden. Plays songs from the Glenn Miller story, obviously the film. The Best of Glenn Miller. That's an RCA issue, 70s. Glenn Miller's Volume 3 from the Swingin' Big Bands set. We got the Legendary Glenn Miller Volume 12 from that same set we were just looking at. The New Glenn Miller Orchestra, so another Ray McKinley record. Army Air Force music here. This is pretty common on CD, less common on vinyl. Glad to have it. So some more 60s era. So these are songs of the 60s done in the style of Glenn Miller. Let's see here. We've got the Marvelous Miller medleys. So specifically those medleys that he was famous for. More Ray McKinley featuring Bobby Hackett, who's a cornet soloist. Great Glenn Miller and his orchestra. This has the same cover art as that box that went missing. It's another of this set. Legendary. And one more here. We've got Dance Anyone? The new Glenn Miller Orchestra, more Ray McKinley music. So this is going to be 50s, late 50s. Okay, here is the 10-inch version of the Carnegie Hall concert. And actually, I don't think this is the Carnegie Hall concert. I think this is just called Glenn Miller Concert now that I'm looking at this. Still an interesting entry here. A few more, kind of an overflow back here. The best of Glenn Miller. Chesterfield Broadcast, Volume 1. I don't think I have Volume 2. Here's another Army record. This one I got at Wax Trax for $4. Another volume from the complete set. This one, I love the cover on. One of my top probably 5 favorite covers. The Glenn Miller Story. So these are the recordings for the movie that were done by the Universal International Studio Orchestra playing Glenn Miller arrangements. So it's got a very unique sound, but the cover on this is really cool. Jimmy Stewart. There's another copy of this. I really need to purge these more so than I thought I did, and a couple more of the complete set. Each one of these is a gatefold, double album set. Some Tijuana brass music in the Glenn Miller style under the direction of the 70s Buddy DeFranco Orchestra. Here's a Soundcraft Christmas program from the Glenn Miller Army Band. Another volume from the complete set. And back here we've got another. These are the complete V-disc recordings. And yeah, that's a really cool one. Sorry, the bird is cheeping like crazy in the background. And Marvelous Miller Moods, which I believe is a duplicate. Let's look at some of the 7-inch stuff. Okay. So the first part of this stack is the Glenn Miller Collection Volume 2, which is the rarer of the two. There's 1 and 2. And it's also the larger of the two. The case, the original case that I have for it was in such bad condition, I finally just separated out the discs and put them in these sleeves because the case was just in such bad condition. I ironically found a complete one again, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is a complete limited edition volume 2. There's different label variants. This is a Victor label variant. Here are the EP versions of this. I have duplicates. Wait, no, this is volume 2 and this is volume 3. So I got to be very careful. Sometimes they'll use the same label. And this is another EP, Serenade, in blue. Okay, let's look at some of the collections. This is a really cool collection, actually. Somebody sent this to me. The only problem is it has no records, but it's in such good condition. It's a fantastic display piece. The good news is, sometime after I received that, I found this in a store. Same thing on 45. It's got this cool RCA Victor on sort of this blue looking label, sort of teal. So that is a good collection. This is the next one. This isn't purely Glenn Miller, but I wanted to mention it because I also had at one point, the cover was pretty ragged, so I ended up tossing it, kept the records, and all but one of them broke. And it was the Glenn Miller one. And it's a good thing that it was that only one that broke because that particular, this is a silver variant with purple letters. That particular variant, I think it was Pennsylvania 65000, was an original Matrix pressing. So that was it was not a dub, it was not a copy. It was literally a child pressed from the original master Matrix, which is pretty hard to find. Basically only one generation off the wax in the studio. And actually a viewer helped me track that down, and it all had to do with the Matrix number. I was very, very excited about that. Next, I want to look at my collection of Volume 1 limited edition collections. These came out in the 50s. There was many different versions. This is limited edition Volume 1. The most common version of this you will find in the box. This is the pink label version. There is somebody out there that knows what each label variant means. I've got 3 of these box versions. This one still has the pamphlet that came with it, the booklet, and the records are separated. This is the black label variant. The records are not in cases, just separated by paper, because they do have the raised hub. And one of these came with a 45 changer, sort of as a promotion. And part of that was the whole RCA changer that allowed you to stack your 45s without the playing surface touching. And this is the 3rd one I have. That's pretty. These are all complete, but this one has the gray label variant with the purple lettering. And there's a meaning and a history behind every label iteration as well. Moving on, I happen to have it volume 1 in this version too, which is the padded envelope version. Same record set, just in a different package here. And this has a silver label with red lettering. These are all EP discs in all of these that I'm showing you. And I've got the 2nd pressing of volume 1. So it's the same collection, but instead of being on quite a few 45s, it's on 5 12-inch records. But it's the same collection, same pamphlet, same everything, just it's on these 12-inch records instead. Ironically, this smells exactly like one of my grandma's houses when I was growing up, had this smell. And it's sort of a cleaner type of a smell. And for some reason, this set smells exactly like it. It takes me straight back. The benefit of having the 12-inch version over the 7-inch version is that the 7-inch versions are truncated. The songs, they're like, every record has quite a few songs, and they're truncated. So they're not the complete song, whereas the 12-inch version does not use the truncated version of that. Next, I have volume 2. So far, all of those have been volume 1 of the limited edition. So this one is slightly harder to get. This is volume 2. So this is a different set of tunes, presented in a similar manner, a different collection. I have the padded envelope version times 2. The other set that I showed you without the case, I had another case like this. It just disintegrated. So this one's a little harder to find. And then I've got the Army Air Force Band collection that matches the others. I love seeing this stuff written in here. The history behind all of this is just remarkable. I love it all so very much. And the music is fantastic. This is a black and silver label variant. Another EP collection there. Okay, now moving on to 2 box sets I have. These are both Reader's Digest sets. This one is the Unforgettable Glenn Miller, 70 of his greatest recordings, and this is a Reader's Digest. A Reader's Digest were all RCA records that were pressed sort of on demand, as you can see there. Usually super high quality. This particular pressing, unfortunately, has some little bumps in the vinyl, which makes certain songs have a kind of a massive skip. If it wasn't for that, this would be just a great collection. However, I pretty much have the same thing again. This is a red box variant versus the blue box variant. And this one is a much better pressing. One more thing to show you. I promise we'll be done. My 78s. I don't have a whole lot of Glenn Miller 78s. When I started collecting vinyl, I thought all I wanted to do was collect Glenn Miller on 78. And it turns out that's probably one of the lower end in terms of quantity items in the collection. They're expensive. They're hard to find. They're brittle. They don't sound as good as what was available later on. So I prefer to have some of these, but they're not the center point of the collection. I'm not going to go through all of these. I've got them in a paper sleeved binder. And there's some interesting titles. This is sort of greatest hits stuff that's in here. I've got the last Bluebird record that Glenn Miller issued before he was promoted up to RCA Victor's main RCA Victor label. So the last of the Bluebird, the first of the Victor in this collection. Again, it was a gift. Also in the collection, I did not show today, I have a bootleg Glenn Miller record on the Biltmore label. that I've had on the channel before. And there may be one or two other things that I didn't come across when I was preparing for this. And it doesn't take into account all of the CDs and tapes. And there's a lot of CDs and tapes. So that is the Glenn Miller collection as of this date. Always growing, always looking to expand it. But as you can see, I've got no shortage of Glenn Miller music to listen to on vinyl. And I'm very thankful for that. Always want to hear your comments down below, what you think, what you have, what you would be interested in, what I should go for next in terms of Glenn Miller. Thank you guys for watching. Happy record hunting. We'll see you next time.